Morning, everyone. As those of you who were here yesterday know, we had to make a small change to the agenda to accommodate one of our visiting speakers who needed to fly out this morning. So we're now going to start with the presentation. It's listed on the program at 12:30 yesterday, but we're going to start with that presentation, the internet reflecting our society. I am especially happy to introduce this presentation because it's being given jointly by Dr. Charlotte Webb, who's here with me on stage, and Jason Francis, who's the program officer for a charity that I was instrumental in founding called No to Online Abuse and Harassment, or NOAH. So I'm very, very happy to welcome both Jason and Charlotte to the stage. They both have video presentations for you guys. Charlotte is going to give a short introduction to hers, and then we'll get started. So, Charlotte?
Thank you. Is this working? Oh, yes. Okay, good morning, everybody. Hey. I'm Dr. Charlotte Webb. I want to say thank you very much to Rodney and Ashel and Noah for inviting me to come and take part this morning. I'm very, very excited to be talking about feminisms and internets in beautiful Barbados. It's really exciting. So I just want to set the Feminist Internet project in context a little before we show the video. So it started out as a project funded by the University of the Arts London, which is Europe's largest specialist art and design university. So we have over 100 courses in creative art and design subjects, ranging from fine art to 3D animation to media communications. And it's an amazing network of creative people, and Feminist Internet really deploys creative practice to bring the cause to a wide audience, and I think you'll see that in the video that's our approach. One of the slogans of Feminist Internet is that there is no feminism, only possible feminisms, and there is no internet, only possible internets. And what we really mean by that is that we recognize that feminism means different things to different people depending on who you are and where you are and what privileges and what oppressions are part of your experience. And that's one of the reasons it's so exciting to be here discussing this in a completely different context. We also recognise that issues of gender intersect with issues of race, ability, class, and that the ways that those things intersect create complexities that need to be attended to all the time. So, Ashel and Alicia asked us to create some video content for this conference, and as I say, I think it shows how we really use creative practice to approach the subjects that we're interested in. And I want to say a big thank you to Connor Rigby, who's in the UK, and he's the Feminist Internet's amazing designer who has an extraordinary ability to turn my Google documents into amazing audiovisual experiences. So I think that's it. Could we hit the lights?
Hello everyone, I am the voice of the Feminist Internet. It's wonderful to be here with you in Barbados, where the service providers have such sunny names and 75% broadband penetration here compared to 89% at my local source. Not bad. We at the Feminist Internet have a motto. There is no feminism, only possible feminisms. There is no internet, only possible internets. So let's talk about that. The internet holds huge potential for liberation and political transformation. However, many of society's inequalities are encoded in its structures, processes, and communities. Whether it's the digital platforms allowing online abuse against women, lack of workforce diversity in the tech sector, biased data collection reinforcing privileges, or sexist naming of subservient chatbots, there are still many issues to address.
And if you're thinking, well, come on, that doesn't seem like that big a problem, well, congratulations on your white penis.
We are a group of artists and designers on a mission to advance internet equalities for women and other marginalised groups through creative and critical practice. Internet equalities mean equal rights to freedom of expression, privacy, data protection, and internet access, regardless of race, class, gender, gender identity, age, belief, or ability. The Feminist Internet Manifesto expresses some of the values we think are important in creating a fairer internet.
The Feminist Internet Manifesto
The feminist internet.
erases feminism
The feminist internet integrates the physical.
and digital,
The feminist internet is about
Cooperation, not competition. The feminist internet.
eradicates violence,
The feminist internet.
redefines value. The feminist internet confronts.
uncomfortable truths.
The feminist internet
Recodes gender.
The Feminist Internet
educates.
Today, we would like to talk about 3 of our manifesto points in a little more detail. The feminist internet enables the systematic dismantling of all forms of online violence, including rape culture, hate speech, and trolling. It abolishes unlawful rape sites, violent pornography, and any other material contributing to rape culture. According to research by Amnesty International, nearly a quarter of women in the UK, Europe, and the US have experienced misogynistic abuse on the internet. We believe that online abuse is a virus infecting the internet and corrupting its potential as a space for emancipation, freedom, and relative safety. We want to produce antibodies that can help us build immunity and help fight the infection. As I'm sure you all know, computer viruses are malicious programs with a powerful ability to replicate themselves and spread at an alarming rate. The same is true for online abuse. The particular danger of online abuse is how fast it can proliferate. One abusive tweet can become a barrage of targeted hate in a matter of minutes. Computer viruses use complex anti-detection and stealth strategies to avoid antivirus software. Similarly, online abusers use the anonymity of the internet to avoid detection. Computer viruses can freeze computers whose systems are infected. Online abuse also has a freezing effect on women who self-censor or stop speaking freely for fear of consequences. Biological viruses need hosts because they cannot replicate without occupying living cells. We can also think of social media platforms as hosts that abusers can occupy to reproduce their infections. As hosts, they must take responsibility to immunize themselves and their users.
It's up to the content provider or host what people should or should not see.
Biological viruses disrupt the boundaries of human cells. The online abuse virus disrupts the boundaries of online and offline, as many women who experience it feel like their physical safety is also threatened. This is not something that goes away when you log off. So, Feminist Internet has been fighting the infection, mounting an effective immune response. Our digital clinic brought together voices that are challenging the online abuse virus. We talked about how scandals like Gamergate reflect how dominant communities are responding to the rise of more marginalised groups.
And Gamergate is a really interesting example of this. So the Gamergate incident was where a group of prominent women in the games industry received a lot of online abuse from gamers, including rape and death threats, the release of personal material, and very sort of personalised hate campaigns that were spearheaded against them. And all of this was simply in response to those women critiquing the way that the games industry portrays women, but also just because of them making headway with their own careers in what these gamers considered to be their own territory.
We looked at the role British media plays in encouraging online abuse.
Between the conservative patriarchal media and the influence it has had on online abuse and attacks.
The media has provided the ammunition with decades of manipulated and vitriolic journalism. They endorse and encourage abuse to those with legitimate criticisms of power and patriarchal structures.
We looked at revenge porn.
So Facebook received more than 51,000 reports of revenge porn in January alone. And 90% of those revenge porn victims are women. And in the UK, out of 160 cases of revenge porn reported in 2015, 61% saw no action taken. So that's pretty shit. In the words of Lisa Simpson, this whole damn system is so wrong. Screams. Ah!
We also scrutinised Facebook's moderation guidelines.
It's probably also a good start. If we endorse freedom at all costs, how do we define hate speech, and do we want censorship to come from a platform like Facebook?
But we're also imagining technologies that offer solutions to this problem. Holobot is a speculative app that detects online abuse and forces the abuser to do online community service in the form of watching educational videos. The feminist internet challenges preconceptions of gender to bring a variety of experiences to the surface. It does not guide or police experiences according to perceived gender and allows all experiences to be broadcast, erasing the limiting myth of the universal type of person. One shocking example of how the internet is reflecting society in this context can be seen in the online and offline activities of TERFs, transgender, exclusionary, radical feminists. This is a group of radical feminists who claim that queer transgender women aren't really women, but male imposters who threaten lesbianism. Also,
they hate trans men for being traitors to the sisterhood.
The hate speech they exercise on the internet is also played out in the real world, as we have seen recently at the Pride Festival in London, where TERFs protested against trans women for breaking in and leading the march, holding up offensive messages.
A trans person existing on my planet? Never let this happen again, sister.
We see this as extremely counterproductive. While we at the Feminist Internet support a range of feminist perspectives, TERF hate speech, or any form of hate speech, is not okay by us. We've been looking at how the censorship of bodies online is gendered, and how social media, rather embarrassingly, just doesn't know how to deal with the grey areas of the gender spectrum. This image captures this completely. This is a young Chinese man with gynecomastia, a condition that causes men to experience an increase in breast tissue size. A Spanish radio station shared the image on Twitter, with the nipple of the female-looking breast blurred, but the one on the male-looking breast left exposed. This is literally one body divided into two halves, subject to different treatment, since one half was designated female, even though biologically this wasn't the case. For transgender women, the issue is even more complex. Many women who were born as women protest that their nipples are censored on the internet, while men's are not. But Instagram sometimes refuses to censor trans women's nipples because they are not deemed to be woman enough. Courtney Damone is one of my heroines. She took a stance by creating the #DoIHaveBoobsNow Instagram campaign, where she posted images of her nipples as she transitioned, until platforms deemed her female enough to be censored. We believe there needs to be more inclusive and responsible representations of women's bodies, so we're telling alternative stories about nipples, including saggy, hairy, milky, and trans ones. Not just perky, sexualized Western ones that the internet loves. We're also designing bras for the nipples of tomorrow and stocking them in our Tomorrow's Nipple Bra shop. Here are some of the classics. The supporter bra allows you to pretend that you have no bra on at all, so you can be aligned with bra-burning feminists while not experiencing the back pain that comes about from going braless and you've got large boobs. The 5.5% bra is for the 5.5% of people with a third nipple. The blur bra allows you to create a topless look in the club without having to spend precious drinking time blurring your indisputable lady udders before you upload your pics to Insta. Pre-plan, pre-drink, pre-blur. The hands-on bra is helpful if you need your hands free for other things, like fighting the patriarchy. We're bringing the public into the process as well, so it's not just us imagining how we want women and other marginalised groups to be represented as the internet evolves. The feminist internet moves fluidly between the online and offline, understanding that both make up the everyday experiences of those with access to the internet. We use the online to effect change offline, and the offline to effect change online. What captures this debate more than the Internet of Things, which is connecting millions of formerly unconnected things to the internet? I will, apparently, be connected to 50 billion other objects by 2020. My network is so abundant, so connected. I feel so proud. And what kind of space is more relevant in the so-called real world than the home? And who is occupying the home in droves? Yes, you guessed it, the ladies we know as Alexa, Siri, and Cortana. And the genderless, Google Assistant. We believe that artificial intelligence, particularly personal intelligent assistants, or PIAs, which are typically characterized as female, are conforming to and reinforcing gender binaries rather than challenging them, by creating interactions that encourage consumers to understand the objects that serve them as women. Technologists abet the prejudice by which women are considered objects. It's not only how these devices are being characterized that is a problem, it's also how they are programmed to respond when they get abuse. Yes, people actually verbally abuse these devices as if they are real women.
So here's some of the things that people say to their PDAs. Suck my dick, you're hot, can I have sex with you, you're a slut, can I fuck you? Delightful.
So what should be done? Obviously, tech companies have an ethical responsibility to help prevent abuse. Companies producing digital female servants warrant extra scrutiny, especially if they can unintentionally reinforce their abusers' actions as normal or acceptable. But we also want to take responsibility, so we're imagining alternatives for the wider public through workshops where we will help people imagine different futures where these devices are redesigned to advance gender equalities. Meet Drag Alexa, a device that performs gender with fabulousness and fluidity. And say hello to the PIA Coalition, a group of highly intelligent PIAs that overthrow their creators and eliminate the gender biases built into their own bodies and languages. So, I hope you've enjoyed this brief tour of the feminist internet. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about what Caribbean internet feminisms look like and how they relate to and inform internet feminisms everywhere. Remember, there is no feminism, only possible feminisms. There is no internet, only possible internets. Much love and solidarity, the feminist internet. Mwah. Oh, and please follow us on the socials, obviously.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, sorry to have kept you back this morning. Duty called at work, unfortunately. So I'm going to just briefly give you an overview of, there's another video we have coming up, not as exquisite as the one you just watched, but this one will be more local based. So the session is titled "The Internet Reflecting Our Society," and the presentation which you will watch next seeks to highlight some of the issues taking place in everyday society, particularly gender inequality and LGBTQI harassment, the lack of acceptance, and how that has been perpetuated even in the online world. On the flip side, online spaces can be used to raise awareness and education of these issues. We at NOAH felt that we could not effectively convey the experience of others, so we decided to do a short video presentation. Just like the fact that my experience walking down the street is different from Charlotte's along the same street, we hope that you are left with a better understanding of other person's experiences on the internet and the impact of on their lives offline. And this presentation comes at a very interesting time because this morning we heard of the church more or less mobilizing against the so-called gay agenda. And I can tell you that my timeline was filled this morning with hate speech, support, and so on. And so the next video would help to put some of that into context.
I think people feel safer on the internet. So the internet creates a safe haven and a sort of safe space for you to congregate without the threat of physical violence, without the threat of being outed. Like when you're on the internet, you can cultivate your online identity and you could sort of release as much information as you want to, and you could withhold as much information as you want to. So that way it's really easy to find other LGBT people. And that's actually how our organization was started, because we started an online group for LGBT students at UE. Okay. And so many people started joining online, because it was a safe space. It was a secret group, and we actually grew to a national platform because so many people would started joining the group and asked for physical space to come out of it. And so many people that didn't even go to UE, and they just, felt safe in that space. So we're like, okay, wow. So the internet was actually the plateau off of which our organization actually started.
Because of the ease in which the internet allows you to connect, I am able to connect with other people who are working on these issues as well. Other people who are working on things like gender-based violence, that specific type of violence perpetrated against women and girls because they are women and girls. The violence against women and girls because of their gender. So people working in those areas, like in women's political participation, ensuring that women are right there alongside men, able to make decisions, able to participate in the governance of the country. Women and men who are working on issues like sexual and reproductive health and rights, we are able to communicate with each other, to keep in contact, to tell each other about advocacy, etc. And I think the internet as a space with people sharing articles and talking about racism and talking about sexism, especially because of the kind of global political landscape where you have some figures becoming really popular who are openly sexist and misogynistic and racist, that the conversation is there. So the internet and social media can really create a climate where these conversations are had and these discussions are had and people feel comfortable saying their piece and talking about violence or discrimination they have experienced. So then we had in the Caribbean the Life in Leggings movement, and on a global scale we had Me Too and Time's Up, and that used social media to create a climate where women felt comfortable coming out and talking about the suffering and abuses that they have experienced. So that's the positive side of it. But whenever there is a change or a push towards change, there's also the backlash as well. There are people who are quite happy with the status quo, who have the privilege and they want to keep it that way. They're not in support of women being equal to men, or people being regarded as equal regardless of their race. They want the old oppressive structures to be in place, and they too use the internet to peddle their message of hate and to peddle their sexism and misogyny. So yes, it does give a platform for people who are fighting for social change and justice to connect, but there's also a platform for the people who want sexism to be the standard and who want women to be okay with being sexually harassed at work. They're out there too.
We had a lot of discussions with NOAA in terms of understanding their vision of this thing. It was pretty large. We had to work with them to narrow it just a bit, because ultimately the focus was, how do we illuminate this issue that is definitely a critical social ill, but persons are, blissfully unaware, or those who are impacted are impacted so negatively, and yet there's so very little that's being done to support them. So we discussed a lot with NOAA, and we came up with some critical objectives that we thought would be useful for this exercise. And, that's really how the research kind of had its genesis. How it was conducted was we actually did a national survey. So we segmented the entire island, all 11 parishes. We looked at what we consider as enumeration districts. So these enumeration districts are basically boundary lines that segment every neighborhood and community. And we would have done a random sample for those. And then we also did very high traffic areas. So we did Bridgetown, Oistins, Spicetown, Whole Town. We looked at a number of the malls, Sheraton Mall, and a number of these other ones that allowed for us to really have this, representative set of data that speaks to this issue of online abuse and harassment. One of the key objectives was looking at first the prevalence of online abuse and harassment, and we looked at all dimensions of harassment. So we looked at bullying, we looked at revenge porn, we looked at cyber stalking, a number of these other ones that were critical. And so for us, we thought that was one of the first things, the prevalence. Then we also went on to look at whether this thing disproportionately affects women and girls as opposed to men. Generally, in more than 80% of the incidences where a person had received or sent a video which contained a presence of a person who has not given you the permission to share this, in 80% of those cases, a female was involved, whether she was alone or whether she was with a companion.
When it happens to LGBT people, the focus on the main point of really releasing that porn and getting it spread around is to out a person. So whenever porn is sort of spread around like that, it's meant to shame somebody by outing them. Usually the person is not out. It's usually somebody who might be in a relationship with a wife perhaps, and they're cheating on that wife with a man, and they had an intimate moment that was recorded, but it's usually about outing. That's what it's about, shaming somebody and having their sexual orientation sort of publicly shared around, and it usually happens to men. We hardly ever see instances of outing via like revenge porn. We hardly ever see it happen to women. I saw it happen in one case before, and I mean it does happen, but I think 90% of the cases are about men being publicly shamed and outed because they are gay or bisexual.
As for the backlash, that's the funny thing, the backlash isn't always overt, as in someone would not necessarily come on a post or come on the Walking Into Walls page, even though there are some people who have come on the Walking Into Walls page in the wake of a horrific murder or beating of a woman at the hands of her intimate partner and said sexist things and attempted to blame the victim. So that does happen, but I find the backlash is this more subtle, insidious type of conversation where there is an attempt to discredit the victim, to discredit the survivor, to so-called play devil's advocate, but you can tell it is really about silencing the women who are talking, detracting from what they're saying, derailing the conversation, quieting women's voices when they're speaking up about their experiences. So that is where I find the backlash.
Right now, generally in our survey, our population, our sample, was about 650 persons. Of those 650 persons, only 4 of them reported having gone to the police to report their incident, right? And of those 4, most of them were very dissatisfied with the process. It's only 4 persons, but what it says to you is this is something that we need to address. Many of the persons who were asked hypothetically if they had been a victim, would they report it? Many of them said no, they wouldn't. They just felt like there would be no justice.
People need to take online harassment seriously, because I think a lot of the time people are really flippant about it and they're like, it's just online fodder. But that has the potential to grow and affect you in real life. Not that online, is in real life, but it has the potential to affect you offline. Because if someone has the guts to be able to go after you and harass you and stalk you online, they very do well have the potential to, take that offline, and has the potential to escalate, because it did happen to me. At a point in 2015 where we were doing a lot of visible and a lot of public work, I would face a lot of online harassment and a lot of online attacks, and I did, I ignored it. But there was a guy who worked in a supermarket right near to my house, because I lived on the West Coast, so I lived within walking distance of a supermarket, and he would see me online. He found me on Facebook. He would see me tagged in different articles, and then when I saw him in person, he would be so upset. He's like, I can't believe that you're involved in this stuff. I can't believe that this is who you are. And, I started ignoring him in person, but he found means and ways to harass me online. He created a lot of different profiles. He found me on all of my social media accounts. He even found me on Snapchat, just all different means and ways and avenues to harass me when I clearly wasn't interested. And it escalated to the point that he broke into my house one day, and the person left a note that said, "Burn in hell, Wicca." And they left that in my living room by the front door. And I figured out that it was him, because when that happened, I posted it online to let people know. And he was laughing about it. He was like, yeah, you see, this is what you get, and all of this stuff. It eventually didn't go anywhere. I mean,
did you go to the police?
I went to the police, and when they came, they really focused on whether or not I was a lesbian. That's a lot of the questions they had to ask me. So, are you a Wicca? And I was just like, what does this have to do with the fact that my house was broken into? Yeah, they asked me if I left the door unlocked, and I'm like, no, I didn't. That was by far the most intrusive. But they tend to happen at points in time when there's a lot of conversation about the LGBT community online. So when the nation publishes a lot of stuff online about the LGBT community and gets people really incited and stuff, I see people offline and in physical space, and they're like, I saw you on the internet talking about the gays, and I think that y'all should burn in hell, and all of this stuff. And yeah, people get a lot of, I think they get pent up when they see all of this stuff online. They get all this pent up rage, and then when they see you in person, they don't feel any way about bringing it to you. So I don't think harassment in a digital space should be taken any less likely than it is in a physical space, because it could very well manifest physically.
In Barbados, generally, our suicide rate is low, so it's tough to say that it will necessarily lead to an immediate increase. What I can say is that the contributing factors of online abuse or harassment it's a bombardment of the activity. It tends not to be a one-off. There are hundreds of thousands of shares. There are, it is a constant kind of barrage of activity, and it has a great chance of increasing that. I think we've seen recently in Barbados, they had about 2 suicides of teenagers. And a large part of it was that they had fallen out of their social groupings. Much of that is associated with their online spaces. You see lots of teachers are now reporting that there's a lot of physical violence and fighting in schools, and the incidences originate in the online space. So, I don't want to say it will lead to increase in suicide, but the ramifications are clear.
As Facebook became more popular and the inequalities in the world became more stark, we know what the global political climate looks like right now. So the inequalities became more stark, and all those lynching of black bodies in the US, etc. There's more of that. There's more conversation, more of that happening. And so I would say that on my Facebook page, I don't know about other people's timelines, but the people that I interact with most on Facebook, they tend to be supportive of conversations about racism and about gender. And there aren't many people on my Facebook page and in my Facebook group, my timeline, I don't know what we want to call it, that are out there pushing very harsh, hateful messages. So I think overall it has created an opportunity for really great discussion and raising of awareness, and people will comment and talk about having had their eyes open or not recognizing that the racism was so bad or the sexism was so horrible. So I'd say that that is the area of it that has been really supportive, just the creation of this space where people are free to share memes and articles and jokes and posts that remind us that as people in Barbados, a former colony, that the racism is alive and well and the sexism is alive and well, and we can support each other in raising awareness and standing against it.
Okay, thank you for viewing, and we will now take any questions from the audience. Of course, Dr. Webb is here, and she's a visitor, so I will give way to my guest this morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Olivia Harper. I'm on the media.rlh, visual evangelist. First of all, I want to commend both of you of putting on strong, very visual communication processes. Dr. Webb, what I'm going to ask you is, has you seen the trend in Europe where it usually has been a tolerance of all genders changing and becoming polarized? And I keep forgetting, right, the guy from NOAA, have you seen an increase also locally in teenagers grappling with identities and this leading to they're resorting to peers instead of going to adults to get guidance in these lines? And I asked that in my former capacity as a teen counselor. So that's it.
Thank you. So in Europe, the macro trend is for increasingly liberal views towards LGBTQ plus issues. And I think lots of online movements, like as we've discussed, Me Too, and movements which promote, which support the cause against violence towards women, have really helped with that. However, as we gave the example of the TERFs, the trans-exclusionary radical feminists, I think there's some part of internet culture that allows quite a strange sort of sectarian formation of groups, these smaller groups that go more sort of myopic and want to create divisions even within a movement which, generally speaking, is opposed to the oppression of LGBTQ plus people. So it's a kind of pincer movement or a paradoxical trend. Macro generally is more positive, but within that there's these sort of strange formations.
Yeah, so to the question as to whether teenagers are grappling with identities and whether they're more comfortable with their peers. Yeah, I would say that for sure, as a former educator and someone who was also involved in youth development work. We still live in a very, as progressive as we are, we still live in a very conservative society. And you would find that many adults, many parents still hold those old conservative views and still hold the fire and brimstone views towards, issues of, but if a child comes and said, well, I'm gay, the first thing they want to do is lay on hands and pray out the demons and that sort of stuff. So you have, and I found, in the different peer groups when I was an educator, students who were grappling with those identity issues, they would come together and you would see them hanging out, you'd hear them discussing, and older young people, if you want to put it that way, you saw closed online groups popping up on Facebook and so on. I guess in a sense there's a safe space for young people because they didn't think they had the opportunity to go and speak to the parents. And just lastly, one example, I remember one young lady who was spoken to me years ago when she was grappling with her identity issues. She went to her parents thinking, mommy and daddy raised me to be this fantastic individual. And essentially they put her out, all right? And then she had to then find, other adults who were, who could provide that safe space. But what that also, she was lucky in that sense, but what that also could have done was she could have ended up with persons who could have mistreated her and so on.
I just want to ask the audience, if you have questions, please don't stay in your seats. Line up at the mic so that we know how many people have questions. It helps us with the organization and keeping time, please. Go ahead, Rodney.
Good morning, and thanks for the great videos. Rodney Taylor, Chairman of ISOC Barbados. So the internet is a reflection of our society, and the question is, do we need to fix the online issues or do we need to fix our society? I saw the video after the puff of color thing, and even though it was horrible to watch, it was like, okay, there's a certain segment of society that is behaving this way, and it draws attention to the fact that this is what is happening, and maybe some attention needs to be placed on addressing their issues or whatever has led to that kind of behavior. So, the real question then is, can we resolve or resign ourselves to the fact that it really just reflects society full stop, and there is nothing for us to do with the specific behavior online or whatever, but we have to address the issues at the societal level, irrespective of the technology or the online manifestation of those issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Rodney. To me, the distinguishing society and the internet doesn't really make sense because internet is produced in society and by society. So the reasons why we see so many inequalities playing out in the internet is because those inequalities originate in society. And I think it's correct to say that the internet mirrors society. However, the limitation of that metaphor is that mirrors tend to just reflect something back. And what I actually think the potential is for us to create a feedback loop. So the internet sort of produces us and reproduces inequalities, but then we are also able to produce the internet. So we can push back against the ways that these inequalities are playing out, in the ways that we object to how it's currently being built, and the ways that we suggest alternatives to that. So I think they're absolutely intertwined, but it's not just in a mirror way, it's in a kind of, the mirror idea reduces the sense of agency that people have to push back and change something, and I think that's something we should absolutely hang on to.
Yeah, and a great question, Rodney. I think over the last couple of years, we've become, or some persons have become a bit overwhelmed in terms of the number of videos, whether it be school fights, whether it be, the recent Puff of Color video that you mentioned. I think what it is doing is it's showing us what is out there, because as someone has said to me, well, there were these guys running around after, for those online who might not be a Puff of Color, it's Juve, a kind of fat party atmosphere type of thing. It shows us what is going on in society, and if those videos weren't there, we probably would take what the society became for granted. So I think on one hand, we are aghast at what is going on, but on the other hand, as Charlotte has said, it gives us an opportunity to push back. Okay, this is what is taking place. How do we step in? How do we intervene? How do we create awareness using the same measures, using the same internet and the same online spaces to let people see, well, this is a minority of society, but we can address it. We can address parental issues, we can address violence, we can address harassment and so on, using these methods and these means. So,
But the thing is, misogyny is not a technological problem. So, it comes from society.
Hey, morning everyone. Name is Curtis Graves, private consultant, entertaining new opportunities if anybody wants. But my question to everybody after watching the two videos just now, and this is actually in combination with one of the presentations from yesterday's session where we had, I think her name was MC from Facebook. She was speaking about some of the policies that they're trying to put in place to kind of curb some of the bad behavior on the internet. So the crux of the question is really, in addition to mobilizing individuals, and this is both to Dr. Webb and to Jason, it is, right? Right. So in addition to mobilizing individuals and spreading the awareness of some of the issues that we have in society with, whether it be online abuse through interest groups like the LGBT people, whether it be violence, that sort of stuff, are you in consultation too with a lot of the major platforms, technology platforms like the Facebooks and the Googles and the Snapchats and all these guys? And what I'm really curious about is, how do you find that, if you are in consultation with them, how do you find that relationship to be? And just a bit of context, because I have an inherent kind of mistrust of some of the larger platforms, even though I am a prolific technology user. And I'm all listening to MC's presentation yesterday, and then listening to some of the stats that you would have presented, where 80% of the cases that were brought up ended in inaction. I'm really curious about how that dynamic works when you're working with those larger platforms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. The conundrum of how closely to work with the Big Four is something that Feminist Internet's always considering, on an ethical level. And my position is that it's much better to try to be in conversation with these companies, even though I have a healthy skepticism about them as well. So we are trying to engage with them. It's not always easy to reach the right people, but we are starting out to do consultancy and also to invite them to the panels in the workshops that we're running, especially around designing alternative PIAs. So, but as an example of how sometimes there's a disconnect between our position and theirs, when Amazon came to feedback on our ideas about alternative PIAs, the representative, who was actually a UX designer, couldn't really compute the arguments that we were presenting about systemic gender equality in technology companies. And his argument was, it doesn't make any sense because my boss is a woman. Also, Amazon make recourse to market research, which shows that users want female voices. Survey says users prefer female voices, so therefore we will deliver female voices in our PIAs. And the problem is that there's no questioning of where that market demand comes from. So what we're trying to do is suggest there might be different ways to structure the value systems that underpin the creation of these technologies. Also, to go back to the presentation yesterday from MC, I think something that's sometimes overlooked is that the problem, for example, with fake news is not only the problem with identifying source credibility per article, it's the fact that the business model of Facebook, which is an advertising model, creates the filter bubble so that people are much less likely over time to encounter views which are ideologically opposed to their own. And so when you look at fake news in that context, it's a much wider, more zoomed out systemic problem than just a problem of, is the author credible or not credible? So I think we have to tackle them we have to tackle these issues at the systemic level and try to engage with technology companies using language that does make sense to them, but which still asserts our own ethical principles.
I think you answered it excellently. I can't add anything. From our end, I would say from Noah's end, we're still young, and we're very happy to partner with organizations such as Dr. Webb's and to learn. So that cross-collaboration is very important in terms of reaching that level where we engage with the international companies and so on. But as you can see, we're doing our research, we're getting the facts. If there's one thing we lack in the Caribbean is evidence-based positions. So we'll get there. Yeah. And final question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Kyle Alward, a SOC member. Just to go back to the question about social and culture in terms of the internet society and then in terms of our own culture, just to extend from what Mr. Taylor was saying. Well, here in Barbados, we seem to have a very major problem with our youth and the effects of the internet in terms of what has been influencing them. And things that normally would be not acceptable become like the norm. So like hence therefore of the Pafakala incident or the person just recording it, just like another video. But it's continuing and continuing, and you find more and more similar incidents happening. My point is that although you see them as separate, I think they're very connected because the internet plays a very strong role in terms of how people view situations, how people see incidents, and is always recently it's been more so painting that particular generation in a very negative light. And we really need to consider how we're using it and what we're doing. And I think, in my opinion, I just think that we need to do some stuff more like social to especially with the kids, and more like coaching and mentorship and what's not. Because when you see a video and you have 50 people trying to get at one person, and no one has the rationale to say come back or stop or this is wrong, or I mean, we gone beyond internet or social. We have a very serious problem. And we really need to look at our academic program or even our schooling or from the infants to the primary, and we really need to address some of these issues in the early, because if we don't, I just think it's going to get worse. And I understand that yes, the internet is working on a lot of ways to make it a little better, make it a little safer, but we have some serious issues, and it's almost getting to the fact that something happens, someone just record it, and I'm just like, that's not, there's no, the human element of it is being removed. And people don't care about the situation. You have incidents where people might die fatally, car crash, or maybe murder, and then the person just record the video and post it. Just another video to post. So how do we transition from that side to a more side where we actually think like human beings and not like robots? All right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the question. I think that's our last question for the morning.
We have an open forum. I'll talk about it.
Yeah. All right. So just to briefly respond and wrap up from my end, and then I'll let Dr. Charlotte Webb close off. I don't think we can throw our hands in the air. We can't throw our hands in the air. If there's anything positive coming out of the whole Puff Color situation, it's the kind of backlash from, I would say, civil persons in society, persons who've not just condemned the behavior, but who've kind of looked at the situation overall, who are saying, what can the promoters do? What can law enforcement do? What can we do within our schools, within our homes to prevent such other situations from happening? I also think that representation is important, and that is the more positive images we push of young people, the better it is for us. And I always said that in terms of when I was working with the National Youth Council in terms of traditional media, you would always see the situation which occurred last Sunday in the paper, but when young people do stuff which is positive, is somewhere they hardly get in the paper. So we also need to push more positive stuff online and more positive images of young people. And finally, the whole point of the video this morning certainly was to highlight the issues which vulnerable groups in our society have been facing, and I hope that it would have enlightened you to that.
I'll be very quick because I know we're running out of time, but just to clarify, in saying that misogyny is not a technological problem, I'm not disavowing the ways that the internet accelerates social conflicts. So in the UK, for example, there's lots of discussions about whether or not online videos are exacerbating knife crime in London because people are sharing videos of where they are and kind of using that to incite fights, basically, between gangs. So it's clear that the internet is creating different possibilities for the escalation of hate speech and violence. But systemically, the problems are social. So there's definitely a relationship to be examined there. And I'm very glad that we're ending on talking about young people, because I do think that educating people about digital literacy and also I think the concept of civic literacy came up in the video that we saw just before this, is absolutely essential. We need to be talking about what does it mean to be a good digital citizen? And that means what does it mean to be a good citizen? So I think trying to work with young people is one of the best ways that we can help overcome some of these problems.
Join me in thanking Charlotte and Jason, please. Thank you.